Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second day of International Conference, Consulting Without Borders, Working Together for a Better Future. This conference is hosted by Gabriel Al-Salem Foundation. Thank you to everybody who joined us yesterday in our first day, and what a day we had. We had participants from over 20 countries all over the globe. We had many questions. I'm sorry, I think I disconnected myself. Technology, sometimes it is a little bit challenging. I'm sorry about that. So talking about yesterday, we had a very rich day. We had a panel discussion on environmental challenges, one world. And there we talked about all sorts of issues, starting with eco-anxiety and also discussing the education and how it can help solve the environmental issues. We had a wonderful panel on happiness, and we got a lot of questions about that. And I hope that all of you are now having your happiness bank account, which continues to grow every day as you've learned to add small happy occasions in that bank account. We also had the award ceremony that we hosted for our wonderful award winners, and we gave them acknowledgement for their amazing work. And for best projects, that we selected in 2020 in social reform, social adaptation, and also in the category Consulting Without Borders for excellent cross-border initiatives. All this work that we're doing with this conference, I believe it shows that the Gabriel Al-Salem Foundation is truly living up to its mission, which is to build connections, promote excellence, and create sustainable growth. They say it's not important to get somewhere, but to enjoy the journey. I certainly enjoyed the process preparing the event, although it was very, very challenging at times, and I am enjoying hosting it. And before we move on to our next discussion, I wanted to acknowledge my wonderful colleagues without whom I wouldn't be able to have this event, and without whom the foundation wouldn't be able to host this conference and to do the award for excellence in consultancy. This is, of course, the foundation's board of directors, which include Gulsum Akhtamberdieva in Kazakhstan, Stephen Tupper in the UK, and Janibek Suleimanov in Kazakhstan. I also wanted to thank our wonderful moderators whom you met yesterday, and you'll probably see them today as well, at least in the audience. This is Robinder Sachdev in India, president of Image India Institute, and also Roman Vakulchuk, who is now in Norway. He is a senior researcher at Norway Institute of International Affairs. I also wanted to thank our remote producer for this conference, Tim Son from Son Social Media Solutions, who is in the back of our broadcast making things happen technically. And I wanted to thank our partners, DEI, Development Alternatives Incorporated, international development company working in over 100 countries, who provided us with two wonderful speakers for this event, whom you will meet today. Also, the Image India Institute, an innovative think tank and incubator working across countries on a number of issues, including politics and legislation. And also the International Institute for Cultural Diplomacy in Dubai, which helps create awareness and teach people about the Gulf region, about foreign cultures. And of course, many thanks to our wonderful speakers. Some of them had to be up in the middle of the night to join our panel discussions, because as you know, our speakers come from 10 countries, and the time zone difference is up to 18 hours. This ends my little introduction. I hope you will enjoy our next discussion, which is coming up soon. It's called The Richness of Diversity. Please don't forget that you can comment on whichever social media you're joining us from. It can be on Facebook, on Twitter, or on the foundation the YouTube account. You can ask your questions, we'll see them, and we will try to answer them in real time. Thank you very much. And with this, I'm moving to our next panel, The Richness of Diversity. Hello again. I am also the moderator for this panel on the diversity. And the reason I'm doing it is because in my life, both personal and work life, diversity always meant a lot. Family is very diverse. I personally worked in many countries in my life, and diversity just in general fascinates me. So I invited here wonderful people who will help us see the diversity from different angles. I would like to welcome here Francesco D'April. He is joining us from Italy. He is past chair of ICMCI, and all consultants, of course, know that this is International Council of Management Consulting Institutes. And I would like to remind you that Gabriel Al-Salem, in whose name and memory we have the foundation and we are holding today's event, he was awarded after his tragic death, member of the Meridian Order by ICMCI, and that happened in 2011. He was awarded this for his pioneering work in developing consulting industry in Central Asia. Francesca is also a management consultant, of course, himself, and for many years he's been working across borders between East and West. I also would like to welcome here Gib Bullock from the UK. Well, actually, I'm not sure where Gib is joining right now. I met Gib in 2016 when we had a conference together with EBRD in Tbilisi, in Georgia. And Gib was one of the speakers there, and he was also kind to be one of those guests who gave out our awards. So he was one of the guests of honor who welcomed our winners, and you could see them in the photographs which I showed yesterday from that event. Gib is an award-winning social entrepreneur and speaker, and he was also a UK's Management Consultant of the Year in 2008. And I'm sure Gib will talk more about his background, but I just want to say that after 20 years in Accenture, Gib left the company in 2016 to write his book and also to start the business Decelerator. And I'm sure he can talk more about it. I'm also very happy here to welcome Judith Ogedegbe from Nigeria. Judith currently works as executive director for DAI in Nigeria, but she has over 20 years of experience as a management and international development consultant. Judith says that she is passionate about driving change that leads to sustainable growth and profitability. And she enjoys delivering results through an employee ownership culture, operational performance, and growth impact. We also had to have our fourth speaker, Matt Trevisic, but unfortunately, the technology failed for him because he is now in the area of the United States in the Northeast where there are big storms, and he just emailed me this morning saying that they have no power in their house. Unfortunately, he's not able to join. We are very sad about it, but maybe we'll still see him. Maybe he'll be able to join us a little bit later in the event and at least participate in our later discussions. So diversity is a very diverse topic in itself. And that's what I realized when I started thinking about this panel. There are, in fact, so many types of diversities that we have to deal with in almost every day. And of course, it won't be possible for us to focus on each type of diversity in the short time that we have today. And also look at our speakers. They have such diverse backgrounds and experience. Francesca led for many years a large international organization. Gib worked in the corporate world and then changed it completely himself. Judith is focused on the international development work. So to start this discussion, what I will do, I will ask each of the speakers to please tell us what type of diversity speaks to them and is most important for them right now. Maybe because it has to do with their work or their personal life. And after this initial round, we will go more in depth to discuss those types of diversities. And of course, we always welcome your questions. Please don't forget to put your comments, and questions will show them on the screen, we'll acknowledge them, and we'll try to address them in our discussion. So I think we can start with Francesco. Could you please tell us about what diversity means to you and how you can address it?
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for inviting me to this meeting today. It is important for me to share how diversity and cultural diversity affect my professional life and business life, because this is a way nowadays, to open the mind and see the world with different glasses. As you have said, I've been chair of the Foundation thanks to the on to
Francesco, I'm sorry, the sound is come and goes. I'm very sorry. Yeah, can you? It's just this. We cannot hear. No, yes, unfortunately, the sound is not. Yeah. Is there anything that maybe you can adjust there? I'm very sorry. Yeah, of course, as we're doing this online event, technology sometimes doesn't work in our favor. It doesn't mean that when we are doing a physical event, things always go smoothly, but especially when you're trying to connect speakers from around the world, and they're on different time zones, and everybody's working in different setups. So sometimes we just have to deal with these issues of technology. But as they say, if that's the worst we need to handle, that's maybe not so bad. So while Francesco is adjusting his headphones and his microphone, maybe we can ask Judith to tell us about her background in a bit more detail, and also the type of diversity that speaks to you and the one that you have to deal with in your life today.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Hello, everyone. As Victoria has introduced me, my name is Judith Ogedegbe, and I serve as the Executive Director of DI Nigeria, which we are a global development company, and we work in over 100 countries. My experience has been over 20 years where I started as a management consultant in making business decisions, business transformation, and then going into international development, where my passion really lies, making the world a better place, ensuring that we give the kind of results that are sustainable and sustainable developmental goals. What really speaks to me over the work I have done over the years in the development world, particularly in DAI, is that of cultural diversity. Working in a global development company like DAI, with working in over 100 countries, has fully exposed me to the richness and the essence of diversity, and has helped us as a business, as a development company to grow, because we are largely diverse from communities to countries where we try to impact lives and have sustainable development goals. And so what I will be talking on largely today is how cultural diversity affects and promotes the work we do. I will be looking at the richness and strength and our collective strengths, as well as the challenges it brings and the impacts we face from the from our diversity as a people. I'll be talking about the different workforces and how it affects people from different backgrounds. I would also be throwing light in about Nigeria, how diverse we are as a people, and how this cultural diversity affects what we do within Nigeria, as well as having international partners work with us, coming to Nigeria to work with us, and also I going out, because I work in a really big company like DAI, going out to support projects, working in Africa and the Middle East from my previous experience. I will be sharing all of my experiences on diversity, but really focusing on what culture does, what culture is, as we look at diversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith. And so I understand that you will be focusing mostly on cultural diversity, right? And that's what speaks to you most, based on your work and based on where you are. And that would be wonderful. That was actually one of the types of diversities that I was considering for this discussion to begin with, because we are consulting without borders, and we are consultants without borders. And we see that more and more as the world becomes closer, and especially with this remote access, this is probably getting easier and easier for us to connect with different cultures and to bring those cultures into our life. And that's why cultural diversity that definitely means a lot. And I think we can, maybe in this conversation, we can come up with a few tips that we can share with our listeners who are consultants and businesses, on how to navigate the cultural landscapes and how to turn some of the challenges that they might be facing dealing with different cultures into opportunities. That would be the ultimate goal of today's discussion, I think, specifically on cultural diversity. And as we are waiting for Francesco to come back, maybe then we should give the stage to Gib with his take on diversity. And please, Gib, your introduction.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I was hoping when we lost Francesco, our second speaker, I was... Yeah, I hope there's not just going to be one of us left or two of us left, but I'm enjoying the discussion so far. I was hoping to show just a couple of slides on the take that I have. I don't know whether Tim's able to do that. Oh, as if by magic, he is. Great. So hopefully people can see that I want to take a slightly different take on diversity. We normally associate diversity with, well, from the corporate world that I was in, thinking about people from different genders or different ethnicities, cultural diversity that Judith's going to talk about, sexual preferences. I'm really interested in, well, I call it cognitive diversity, but what I mean in simple terms is, how do we embrace and accept people who think differently in our organizations? And how can that actually drive new ways of promoting business value? So I'm going to just try and share what I mean with a couple of fun slides to get people thinking differently or seeing the world in a different place. This slide, if anyone knows, they can put it in the chat as to where this is. It's South America. I'll tell you, it's actually in Brazil, Sao Paulo. And it's a real slide. It's not doctored. It just shows this inequality that we have. Terrible inequality across the world. So let me just get you to online close your eyes a little bit. And we'll move on to the next slide and think about the world. Think about the world and just have a picture in the world and open your eyes. Next slide, Tim. And I wonder how many of you had this image in your mind when you were thinking about the world. Judith will be trying to see where Nigeria is upside down there, but we're normally seen and programmed to see the world the other way around. That's what we're taught. That's the received wisdom. But why is that? Let's try another one, actually. Maybe close your eyes. Think about your favorite painting. It could be in a museum, an art gallery. It could be on the wall in your house. And if you open your eyes again, and Tim will move on. I wonder how many of you had this image in mind. Next slide, Tim. And people, the smart artists amongst you can put in the chat who that artist is. But this painting came out in about early 1950s, when the paintings were meant to be beautiful and look like things and be pictures. And along comes this crazy artist whose name is Jackson Pollock. I can't see the chat and talk at the same time. American artist. Can you imagine what kind of reception that crazy painting got? And my kind of question is, I wonder where the Jackson Pollocks are in our consulting organizations, in our business, people that come up with these radical ideas that can shift things. Last one is a slightly different question I'm going to give you. Next slide, please, Tim. I want some comments in the chat, if you can, as to what you think this is. And more importantly, what you think it's worth. My estimate, roughly, is $500 for this. And I don't know how quickly comments can come in.
I think everybody's
seeing any guesses.
Perplexed.
They're perplexed. Okay, well, maybe I'll give you a clue. Next slide, please, Tim. This is the same image. But sometimes it's easier to see what things are by taking a step back, changing your perspective. Blank canvas, ready for paint, I see. That's actually pretty good, Ron. That's getting close. Any more guesses? Well, if there's not, let's move on to the next slide, Tim. And many of you may recognize that picture. Yeah, Monet, poppy fields. The first picture I was showing you was my attempt at showing you a blob of paint. Monet painted with these blobs. And when you put all the blobs together, you get an image like this. And my estimate is that this is worth about 50 million, I think. It's in the Musée d'Orsay, Paris, 3,200 square centimeters, maybe 30 blobs per square centimeter. So I reckon that every blob of Monet's brush is worth $500 today. Wasn't worth it at then, but wouldn't that be amazing if you could make that amount of money? So what I'm saying, next slide, please, Tim, is that in business, it would be great if we can find people who are thinking a bit differently, prepared to break from the herd, prepared to stand up for what they believe in rather than just going along with the flow. I got taught all sorts of things at business school when I was doing my MBA and how things are meant to work in business. And frankly, I like to challenge some of these things. And in business, we call this term an intrapreneur. So we know about entrepreneurs. Many of you will be entrepreneurs who are somewhat creative and prepared to take risks and come up with new ideas. But what about these people who exist in large organizations? Next slide, please, Tim. That's where we call them intrapreneurs. And just to finish off my own introduction, Victoria kindly mentioned the book I wrote. I hadn't intended to write a book. I was working in Accenture as an intrapreneur. I got labeled an intrapreneur because I was trying to create a not-for-profit business within what is one of the most profitable, biggest consulting organizations in the world. And we did a lot of work like Judith is doing. We worked around many countries in sub-Saharan Africa and around the world, bringing business and technology expertise to where it was most needed. We halved people's salaries to do this. We worked on a non-profit basis. We had NGOs and others buying our services rather than accepting pro bono. So it was a very radical, different type of business that was, I would say, highlighting this idea of cognitive diversity. We needed people that would think differently. When conventional wisdom said, pay people more, you get more, people work for profit, we were challenging these norms, seeing things in a different way. And just to finish off, I guess the decelerator thing, people are wondering, what is that? I wrote the book because I had a burnout in late 2014. The that was a trigger really to think about, some of the craziness of the system that we are working in and the pace that people are working at. So my sense is if we want to make people think differently, if we want diversity of thought, maybe we need to start by slowing people down. I know that's a bit different from the norms. We think we have to go faster in business, bigger in business, accelerate in business. But my sense is that perhaps, and just a suggestion, and you can agree or disagree and we can discuss it, perhaps the fastest way to drive change in our business world today is actually to start by slowing down. I'm prepared to be challenged on that. So back to you, Victoria. That's my take on diversity so far.
Thank you very much, Gib. I have to say that I actually joined a couple of your online sessions, or rather seminars, and it was quite inspiring. It was very different from what you usually see in just a business related seminar or a workshop, or whatever we want to call it. So it's really a place where you can truly decelerate and decompress, where you can enjoy just having usually a lot of people joining and have the group, be part of the group, and also enjoy various activities which are not traditional activities, in a way that you're using improv to kind of loosen people up and make them feel more relaxed. We were doing a story collectively, like going in rounds, and everybody was contributing to a story, and that's all very spontaneous. And I think that's what we are very often missing in our life, because our life just is so fast these days, even if we're in lockdown still. And
Absolutely.
we just constantly have to perform according to certain expectations. And those expectations start with our family lives, going into work and everything, even just, driving on the street. I guess it's all expected. I'm not saying we shouldn't drive in any crazy way, but everything is expectations and certain norms. And just sometimes to break off of that, it's just really a refreshing experience. So it was really enjoyable. And I would recommend to anybody who is interested to connect with Gib and his Decelerator.
I'll put something in the chat about that, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. I should say, because I see there was somebody coming in from Glasgow, and my accent is obviously Scottish. I'm in France at the moment, but the Decelerator is actually renovating a farm on an island on the west coast of Scotland, and that's the place, as you say, where we bring the unlikely people that business doesn't normally meet. It's artists and improv people and musicians, and I think that's where we're going to get this diversity of thinking, is when you get people who are doing different things from you, then you might spark some new ideas, some new innovations around the role that business can play in society. Anyway, enough from me. Hello from Glasgow, Stephen Tupper. Yes.
Well, that's actually Stephen Tupper, one of us. He is one of the foundation's members of the board of directors. He is a member of the award committee. He's been with us the whole time with the foundation, and he joined our events. And Stephen is a dear friend and colleague, and he will be actually moderating the next panel, which will be coming after our panel. It will be on partnerships and cooperation for success. So he will also have wonderful speakers from across the globe. But I was actually thinking about two of you, because I knew you probably were close to each other, even physically. So Stephen, as I remember Stephen's Skype headline said before, it said greetings from somewhere in between the airports, because Stephen is a consultant with over 30 years experience, and he is always traveling, working in different parts of the world. Now he is in lockdown in Glasgow, so now it says greetings from Glasgow. So Stephen, and would be probably very close to where the Decelerator is, right? Yep. Well, we have Francesco back, and Francesco, I'm very sorry you had to change positions today, and I hope it didn't add to any stress. So just everything is okay. We're happy to have you back.
No.
And
hope to be successful with this technology today.
Yes, we've been talking basically since you are all. I was just saying that the diversity is such a diverse topic in itself that it's hard to, and I don't want to put you in some kind of a box of one particular type of diversity and try to talk only about that. So I thought that since you also all come from such different background and you've done such great things, you can you can choose and talk about how you see diversity and what it means for you in your life. And Judith talked about from her perspective being in Nigeria and how she sees it also
Hello?
working mostly in the international development world. And Gib talked about his take on diversity coming from the corporate background, leaving that background, starting something completely different. And he has been just introducing us to the notion of cognitive diversity, which is, in other words, it's the diversity of thought.
Hello?
And yes, Francesco, can you hear us? Doesn't work.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear us? We can hear you. Okay. Well, hopefully Francesco can still join us with his experience working for being past chair of International Council of Management Consulting Institutes, where he had to deal with big organizations, consulting organizations in I think over 50 countries. And also, of course, he's an entrepreneur working between East and West. I know that he's working closely with China, being in Italy, helping businesses move from East to West and introducing their products. And so he has a lot to say. So I really hope that we can get him back. But at this point, maybe, Judith is more is more focused right now on cultural diversity, and Gib is talking about cognitive diversity. But can we maybe move those together? Judith, is anything that Gib said about cognitive diversity applicable in your environment? Because, you're a manager, a director of a big organization. And of course, it's culturally different, but it's still it's an organization, it's a company. So have you ever dealt with those people who are different in the way they think? And what is your experience on that? If you have something to comment on.
Oh, definitely. There's something to comment on. And when I looked at Gibbs' painting on the wall with all of the splashes, it just reminded me of how people are really different cognitively. And if I speak about my experience on cognitive diversity, I really look at it from where, as a company like DAI, where we work in over 100 countries, when people try to bring in their learning to what is different, there's usually a pause in the room. It's like everyone is going in one particular direction, and that seems to be the right direction to go to. And so, with cognitive diversity, it's the willingness and the ability to be open to what might really be different. But guess what? That could be a shortcut to making things work. I could talk about examples where the Oxford and the Cambridge and the Eton see things differently from the Harvards and the Yales, right? And with my exposure in working in different communities, we might be talking about the same thing, but because we've got different working experiences, because we've got different educational background, it tends to affect our results and approaches to results, even when we share the same goal. And cognitive diversity is something that I believe we should start talking about more, yes, we've talked about age diversity, we've talked about cultural diversity, because I am very different, and there's the stereotypical side as well as the generalist side of things, where I want to go with like attract like, so I want to go with who have similar education or similar background for me, but just allowing everyone have a voice, whatever education they have, whether formal or informal, just being able to put out there what they think and bringing it all out together will, I believe, is something that will maybe decelerate as well as accelerating to get results. So I like that, Gabe, business deceleration for acceleration. Hashtag. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your intake and the feedback on that. As a manager of a big organization, did you ever deal with some people who are very differently in the way that they approach work? Was it because you worked in many environments? Did it present a challenge to you as a director, or was it did you see that more like as an opportunity when you saw someone maybe probably different from the way that, because usually organizations have their norms, their codes and so on that you have to follow?
So that really depends on what level you are, and experience really helps to make us more accepting to different levels of people. I would say when I was a much younger manager, I just want all of us to go in packs, right? I believed it was faster to get results if we all think in the same way. And as I began to explore the world in development, where you go into communities and you come with all the fancy knowledge, all the technology, all the right processes, and all the right structure, it might just be one difference from a young boy who thinks we should tweak it this way. And so I started thinking about the circle of influence in saying how to actually appreciate what people bring to the table and just being able to listen. So as a young manager, I've got to make the numbers. We need to achieve all the goals we've set. Let's think in one direction. And as I have progressed and been more exposed to different communities, different systems, different people around the world, I am beginning to see that cognitive diversity, allowing people to have their voice, whether big or small, in terms of discrimination, in terms of, well, the manager is not always right? Learning to listen more. And I think communication is more of listening than speaking. And then I would also add that just knowing that every voice counts, however diverse it is. It's how I would say I have experienced diversity in learning, and whoever brings something to the table, let's put it all in there and see what that would look like in the end. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Victoria, can I just
yes, of
just
course,
pick up on something Judith said on this theme when you talked about all these people from Eton and Oxford and Harvard and things. There's a book that I read that's very, very good called Excellent Sheep, by a guy called William Deresiewicz. It's a very difficult name, but Excellent Sheep is the name of the book. And basically the thesis is that these Ivy League institutions in the US in particular, he was focused on, but it goes around the world, they are programming people to excel within the current system. So great business people, great politicians, they all come out of these institutions and go into higher levels, but they're basically excellent sheep. They are not challenging what it is we should be doing or challenging the rules in some way. They are basically following the rules and taught to follow the rules. So we need to think in this discussion, I think, around how we educate people to think differently rather than just programming people in that way. Anyway, sorry, I'll go back to you, Victoria.
No, it's all right. Well, it's your discussion. I'm just trying to to moderate. I'm very happy to see Francesco back. And we also have one question coming from Gulsum, actually. Well, Francesca, were you able to hear a little bit of what we were talking about, or should I, brief you?
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I heard. I follow.
Okay, great. So we started talking about cultural diversity, and then we moved to cognitive diversity, or the diversity of thought in the workplace. But of course, both diversities can also be discussed together in different cultural contexts, and how different cultures also look at that. So as well, there is a question that maybe let's take it now in this context, that we're still talking about cognitive diversity, and let maybe Gib comment on that, and then we can ask you to do your introduction and talk about your experience with diversity and how you see it. So let's handle Gulsum's question about, she talks about in cognitive diversity in one
people
country,
living in one country and thinking. Yeah, I mean, just the
I would like to comment on that as well.
Okay.
Do you want to go first, Judith?
Please, Judith. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I wonder what you think about people living in one country and thinking differently. And I would speak for my country, Nigeria, where I come from. I would say absolutely, people from one country really get to think differently. And let me just paint a picture of of Nigeria, where we are about 260 million people in the world by the 2020 UNDP population census. And then we've got 3 major languages. We speak 525 different languages, talk about being diverse. And we've got about 252 very different minority groups. And so just bringing it into cognitive as well as culture is the way people do things in different groups, right? Because you belong to one minority group or one particular group, you tend to think very much like that particular group, even though we all are. I am from Nigeria, but sometimes there's a difference from the way the people, the Northerners think and the Southerners think. But hey, it's one country. We have been exposed to different backgrounds, different religions, different educational system as well. That makes us think very different and become very cognitively diverse. Thank you.
But don't you maybe think, Judith, I think it's fascinating, and I love Nigeria when I visited there, but it's an incredibly huge, diverse country. I was thinking of my experience. I worked in the Balkans in Northern Macedonia about 20 years ago, just after the Kosovo crisis. And that's a country, it was at the time of 2 million people. I don't know if there's any listeners on from Northern Macedonia, but there were very, very tight travel restrictions. And people were sort of very insulated there. It wasn't as diverse. There were a lot of tensions between 2 different ethnic groups there, but it wasn't as diverse as you have in Nigeria. And I remember thinking at the time that, and what's happened since, is that as borders have opened up and as people have been able to travel, then I think that that's travel has allowed people to get new ideas, to think differently. I certainly find personally travel gets me exposed to different cultures that allows me to think differently. But no, it doesn't surprise me in Nigeria that there's such a diversity of thought and things. It was a little bit more difficult 20 years ago in Northern Macedonia to get people to be thinking about the outside world when you're in a pressure cooker in one country. But I think we should probably let Francesco come in now that he's back on the line.
Francesco, yes. So just maybe you can do your sort of introduction and tell us about your background. Well, a lot of people in the audience, they know you, but just a little bit of your experience as related to diversity, working in different countries, and also what diversity means to you.
Okay, thank you, and really sorry to you and to all of audience about this technical problem. Anyway.
No problem.
Anyway, as you have said, I have started my international approach thanks to my position in the Italian Association of Management Consultants as chair for 60 years, and then representing Italy in the ICMCI, and finally leading the ICMCI for a couple of years. Thanks to these connections, I did approach China in 2005. Joining a conference there. And then I discovered this world. And it was quite new for me and for mostly of the attendants. And then we approached that market, that environment as a market for Western companies, not a way to outsource phase of production. Then we immediately fit the problems of cultural diversity, because it was a country with very old tradition, but very weak in be connected with our environment, Western world. This is the first point. Second point, very important, and was related with the cultural diversity, which affect lifestyle, and then buying behaviors and business behaviors of the goods. Then it was my daily problem every day. It was not related to introduce companies or product in China, and then achieve a consulting agreement with a Chinese company in developing and approaching their business in Europe. So it was not related with the content of the business, but how to manage the business. No? And then I want to go deeply and share with you some experiences that for me are very, very important and maybe can be also interesting for our participants. I had several times, problems in putting together managers and bosses from companies coming from different sides, Western world and Asian and Chinese world. And then I realized these key points. One problem from the Western world and one problem from the Eastern world. In the Western world, you know much better than me that we are familiar with planning a project. No? We used to plan, then we used to have an operational plan, business plan, budgeting, and then contract. Okay? But in order to plan, we need information. If we don't have the right information, how can we plan? And there is mostly of the time from September to December of each year. Millions of people used to play the big match in planning, readjusting the plan, because nowadays they need the right information, especially when you approach countries with different kind of background, organization, institutional or background, and so on. So Western managers are not so familiar to approach this kind of relation with a counterpart, in that case in China, without the right needed information, as they should expect it to have. And then they normally are shocked. They don't know how to react. They don't know how to manage. Because they are not familiar to play without the right information, using planning and the traditional Western model in that area, that region, with those counterparties. This is one problem from the Western side. Then we need to redesign. Of course, planning is important, but we need to rethink our way to interact with other countries, other environment, professional and business environment, without having what is our framework that we are familiar with. And this is one key point. Second point from Easter side, I received a lot of requests from Chinese bosses, no, to interact with. Also, Austin is in business tour in Europe. Okay, they came. They was enthusiastic about meeting people, visiting company, and so on. Then they want to ask about merger and acquisition, joint venture, kind of business cooperation, and so on. Okay. Then we started to develop a project, and then we move in China, and then meeting with their team of managers. So what I discovered several times, that during this meeting, all the supporter of the Chinese boss used to arise problem. No, they are very weak in finding solution, problem-solving approach. No, and there are some cultural background behind this approach. For example, no, risk management. They are familiar with following the rules. Their education from the early beginning was addressed in following the teams, following the rules, give the right answer to the questions. Creative thinking in the years and years ago was very weak. So risk management is something that is serious to manage there. Most of the time, of course, not always. This is one point. Second point in the culture is they like to please the boss. In this way, they are familiar with finding the better way to support his boss. And then if there arise problem, maybe I'm in better position to develop his interest. No? But we lose in our discussion. So nothing can be addressed to the right solution and then move to the upper step. So, and then this is another point. We are in the Western world much more formal, contract, and then we move through. No, in Asia, in China, I had experience with this kind of friendly advice, something that has to be managed. If we don't have the right information, if trust, relationship are much more important in the starting new businesses. So at the end, just was an example from a problem that I find it from two sides. No? What we need is linked with what you were talking about education. No? For the new generation, because the world is there, cross-cultural issues need to be managed. You cannot avoid. No? Then education is very key point on the other side. On the other side, there is also something that is needed. Need to try, experience, be involved, put the hands in the problem, and then learning by experience. I used to call this a kind of cross-business fertilization. No? We need to be there and ask counterpart to come here and live. And learning by doing process is something that nowadays is very, very important together with high-level education courses. This is the first round that I was thinking to share with you.
So yeah. Francesco?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I just thought maybe we lost the voice, but it's great. Yeah. Thank you so much. Are you finished, or do you have still something to say?
No, this is one point. And another point that could be related to my experience is after moving to the agreement to the business development, mostly of European companies are proud of their product. When you have cultural differences and problems in buying behavior and living behaviors, you need to share information about the product. The storytelling is much more important than product sometimes. And the Western companies are mostly familiar with how to use products. And then they go deeply talk about the quality of the product. But what is behind is normal for them. So make no sense to share. In countries where they are very interested in learning and understanding, and when they are curious in approaching you, knowledge about your background, company's background, environment, soft skills is much more important than the product itself. So this nowadays, I'm very strongly involved in the Western world, in Italy, also in Europe, to push our clients to pay attention to this. And then today, with this online business, this is much more important, because communication by video, by short video, by social media is a way to share what we call storytelling. And this is the first step, together with the logistic, that need to be designed before any companies is looking to approach and manage how to compete internationally, especially in not Western world, from Western side. Then I can be happy to also share other views, if there are interested from our attenders.
Yeah. So I thank you so much for summarizing your experience and how you work between East and West and help companies manage their cultural risk in going in a different market, both ways, right? I think what I really like how you, and we talked about this before, about storytelling and how that really helps. And I think it actually it's really a wonderful tool for almost in any way if in dealing with cultural diversities. Because in storytelling, it can be so uniting in many ways. Even in our ordinary life, how do we connect the best ways when we actually tell a little bit about ourselves, and there is a story that we have in common, or just the background? That's how people connect. So just presenting, as you say, a product in a new market is one way of doing it, and might not really bring a lot of success. But if you bring the whole story behind it, that's what probably helps a lot, right? Does anyone have something to comment on that, Gib or Judith, on managing risk and connecting cultures using storytelling?
I wouldn't have a lot to add, maybe Judith has, but I do think it's a really important point about storytelling, which is something that has gone back centuries in most cultures and is this common red thread. I think that no matter how different our cultures are, telling stories, and I certainly have, as an entrepreneur, have found that to try and convince leadership of a different way to go, using story was a very powerful, rather than business plans and numbers and things. I wrote a fake press article, for example, in 2001 about this new business idea set in the future and tried to capture the imagination of leadership. So there's different tools using storytelling, I think, that can really be powerful. I think we've lost Judith. I should have let her maybe speak first, but she'll come back in, I hope.
Yeah, she comes, yeah, in and out. I think also having some issues with the Wi-Fi. Yeah. So yeah, for me, I mean, from my personal background, I just happen to live and work also in many countries and working in many cultures, and sometimes it does take time to get really to the point there. But what I can also I share my experience that, of course, storytelling and connecting on the basic level, kind of it really helps even in business. For example, connecting on the point, oh, okay, I have a child, I have a child too, and then I have a mother, and then those simple things. I think the best conversations in a new country happen in the taxi as you go from the airport, if you can, of course, if you know the language and if you can communicate. They just start asking you questions, you answer, and then you already start get a great introduction to the culture, even just talking briefly to a taxi driver. Of course, it's very basic what I'm saying now, but I really believe that connecting on a human level sometimes goes a long way, even in doing business in a new environment. Judith, do you have something to add to the point of managing risk? Because we saw you kind of leaving us. I know you have some Wi-Fi problems, or should we maybe go to the next question that we got? Do you want us to?
In managing risk, I would just talk about how you mentioned communication is important. I mean, it's very difficult to over communicate, and just listening beyond the words that are being said. Huge risk can be managed. Saying things differently, saying it in your own way, and trying to understand by actively listening to what the other person is talking about. It's a great way to manage risk, and being respectful. The thing is really being open minded to the new things, the very different diversity that you might find that could be your background or exposure limits you from accepting. And so you have this unconscious bias towards it without even knowing it is there. And when you are very open minded and receptive to what the next person, like the group of people, teams, communities are bringing. It's a huge way. It's an excellent way of managing the risk of diversity, because you're looking at it from your own lenses. You're seeing things from your own standpoint and viewpoint, and that's how you're reacting. And when you come in very open-minded and willing to listen beyond the words that are spoken, it's a fantastic way of managing the risk of what diversity you are dealing with.
Thank you very much. Also, I think Francesco mentioned the very good point of how to manage risk is also doing the study and actually the research, right? That's what you also mentioned. And again, I'm very sorry that Matt could not join us because he had some very valuable input. He would be able to add a lot here. I don't want to say for him, but I know that what his company does, it actually does research. They study the sentiments about certain let's say products or services or just the whole concepts, and just he uses the big data to be able to analyze perceptions in the target country of certain ideas or whatever the other side wants to bring there, and that really helps managing risk. Again, I don't want to say too much for him because I don't know in detail of how it all happens, but that was something that he was planning to talk about. And if we do connect with him later, this is something that maybe our participants would want to ask him. By the way, the contact information for all of our speakers is on our website. Right after the biography or the background, there is an email, and I hope you don't mind that I added your emails there in case somebody wants to contact you, have specific questions, so that they could do that. We actually had yeah, Francesco.
I want to add something about how to deal with diversity. No,
of course.
Always, considering watching East and West, and the different cultural background behind. What I learned is about the value of reputation. It's not only related with the value of the brand. It's not only brand. Reputation is something of much more wide. And then how to develop a strong reputation in a country, for a company, for a professional, in something that is quite new. Because reputation starts to be, you can develop reputation, start to be there, don't disappear, and then be friendly, and lose a lot of time, without business, without concrete business, but in learning, understanding, approaching, interacting, living, touching, smelling the place and the market. So the value of the reputation in setting up these cross-border businesses is one of the key points. Second point connected with the reputation is the value of the trust. How to develop trust. And then is something that is not click on and click off. It's something that can grow very, very slowly. And it's not related with concrete short-term business sometimes, most of the times. So these 2 points, I think that has to be very strongly considered, in designing, and analyzing, what is needed to develop international business and approaching markets with different cultural background. It is important from both sides.
Yes.
I don't know if you have other experiences about this.
Certainly, yeah. This is all the great points, and I'm just taking notes so that I could summarize in the end what we have discussed. We also receive here questions from Ron Finch, who was one of the speakers actually yesterday in our environmental panel. And Ron, he's in Canada, he's in British Columbia now, but he's also in lockdown, but he works in Kazakhstan, and he is also talking about how in his work, he's environmental engineer, how in his work they have special seems like platforms, right, to learn about the cultural diversities and how to deal with that. Thank you, Ron, for putting your comments. You also had a question earlier about special interest groups and how that.
Can I maybe answer that one, Victoria? I saw that question.
Back. Yeah, that's the
and
question.
I think it's a great question, Ron, and there are special interest groups, and again, looking at this through the business lens, the centers of power that are trying to keep things the way they are. And we talk a lot in business about this short-termism and that we need to make profit each quarter to keep the system going. And yet we have all these big challenges, social, environmental challenges. And for me, I think the mistake that most people make is seeing this as do we do business or do we address these challenges. And again, thinking about this through thinking differently about the challenges, I see the UN's Sustainable Development Goals as actually, an opportunity to reframe them as business opportunities. So essentially what we're talking about is how we are going to feed and nourish the next billion on the planet and provide access to clean energy and access to water and sanitation and healthcare and education. And these are the Sustainable Development Goals. They're not corporate responsibility things. They are business opportunities in disguise if we can think a bit laterally about how we do them. So that's how I think we have to align these vested interests and show that there is a huge untapped value that we can tap into by solving and addressing these big challenges that you mentioned. So that's Ron's first question. I don't know whether somebody wants to tackle the second question that came in or any other questions.
Thank you so much, Gib. Well, I think as we're coming towards the end of our panel, we have a few minutes left just to maybe, summarize what we've talked about. So we, with some technical challenges today, we did have a discussion in which we addressed mostly cultural diversity and also cognitive diversity in the workplace and the difference of thought. And I just want to maybe in a few bullet points just summarize for our audience. So how do we deal with diversity? And I think we can talk about both of these diversities, or even any other diversities, could relate to age or anything else. So what I was hearing from you, and Judith actually emphasized that a few times. First of all, it's communication and to listen, right? If there is a different opinion, or if it's whether you're entering the different culture, to listen and to communicate. That's, of course, be open-minded, right? That's what you talked about. And then Francesca also talked about, in terms of managing cultural risk, is about reputation and developing trust, storytelling. Instead of bringing a product, we bring a whole story behind it, right? And so what else? Any other points that we can, any tips? I actually have a tip. I think for me, what's also important when you deal with a different culture, or maybe perhaps a person who comes from a different background or whatever it could be, is not to assume things, because very often we assume coming from our own experiences or our own expectations or our own little box that we might have. We assume something about another person or another culture, and sometimes it doesn't help. And I would say that just, again, coming open-minded without any assumptions about what might happen, that also helps in dealing with diversity. Would you take just 1 minute at the end and just summarize for you what kind of a tip you might offer to everybody? Gib, do you want to start?
I think you did a good summary, Victoria. I guess my tip or lesson learned is that people should try and not recruit in their own likeness. That's the temptation. We want to recruit people who think like us, act like us, and look like us. Actually trying to get people who are the polar opposites. When I was working in this group within Accenture, I had people who were very, very different from me. I'm a great optimist. You need pessimists. If you're not very analytical, you need analytics. So you need to have this diversity of a team. And I think that would be my parting kind of tip. Get people who are very different. It might be less comfortable than all being the same, but you're going to get a better result.
Great. Thank you so much. Judith, do you have a word of wisdom at the very end?
Yes, I would say just full contribution and acceptance to how diverse we are, and encouraging inclusion, like Gabe said, to all types of diversity we bring in the planet. I mean, from the presentation yesterday, we don't have a planet B. And so when we begin to enjoy the fullness and the richness of our diversity by being inclusive, respectful, and really, like I keep saying, listening and coming open-minded to what other beliefs, perceptions that other people will be coming with. That's my nugget.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you in our panel. Francesco.
I was thinking to take the challenge. Now, curiosity means to take a challenge, to approach the new, okay? To be open to approach the new. And then this required curiosity from our side. Company that need to develop curiosity inside of the organization and support the team in approaching the challenge with the right curiosity, the first point. Second point, very important, be open to change our approach, our operational model. Because nowadays, if we go straight, we can go straight against the wall and stop. If we approach with the right mood, with the right open mind, curiosity, and so on, we can successfully take this challenge and really change the world in a more positive way. This is my view.
Thank you so much. Well, this brings us to the end of our panel on the richness of diversity, and I would like to thank you all for joining today, and want to wish you all the very best in your activities and your endeavors and your life. And I really hope to stay in touch, and I also hope that you can stay in our audience for at least a little bit, and also ask questions for the next panel participants on partnerships and cooperation for success, which is, of course, important. Probably, it's very important so that we could address and bring together all of the issues that we've identified in the previous panels. And when we end this discussion, I just wanted to show you a video, kind of relevant, maybe not, but about, well, Gib, maybe he was not here in the first day, but I did go back in history of our conference and how we started back in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine, Georgia, and Francesco knows about that. He was in Kiev, in Ukraine, joining us. Well, and Gib, you were in Georgia, right? For the past couple of years, we did the conference and the award ceremony in Bali. That just where my life took me at a certain point in my life. Unfortunately, I'm not there now. I'm back in the US just because of the problem with traveling. But we did it there for 2 years, and it was, of course, a lot of fun. And so I have a little movie in which you can see the glimpses of Bali, and I know that Gib, likes that place a lot. So just for you to enjoy and to hope that maybe sometime we can go back there soon. So again, I wish you all the very best, and thank you so much. And after the movie, we will welcome our next panel discussion, partnerships and cooperation for success. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I've been a consultant for more than 30 years, and this is the first conference of Gabriel Al-Salem Foundation I've attended. It's actually the first conference in 20 years where I stayed for the whole conference. It was extremely useful and great to meet colleagues from 6 other countries and exchange ideas. There wasn't enough time, so I'll have to come back again next year and do it again.
Good morning and welcome to the panel on partnerships and cooperation, which is the final panel today for the Gabriel Al-Salem Foundation 10th annual conference. I welcome you also to this, the second day, but remind you that after our panel, please don't forget that there will later on be a general opportunity to speak to other participants and the panel members during the so-called cocktail party, the link of which you already have. I'm happy that joining me today are some new, young, old and familiar faces for this particular panel. So I welcome Lily from Restless Development down in London, a new colleague, Sanjay Saxena from India, and I'll call him almost an old flame, Chris Horn from Australia, with whom I have worked often in the past.
I thought I was the young one.
Well, as you may have noticed, he's also the optimist on the panel. Before we actually start talking about partnerships and cooperation, you could argue that in all of the development projects that we are individually involved in, or the individual consultancy, there is a need for partnership and cooperation. And I have always worked on the basis that such cooperation is essential for achieving the result, because you never actually get an assignment where there is only one stakeholder to work with. But I'd like to start this discussion off by giving an example of a small but very successful partnership, which comes from a project that Chris and I worked on many, many years ago in the Leningrad region of the Russian Federation. And the partnership developed out of a specific problem. The problem was that underage girls were delivering children in local hospitals and then leaving them for adoption, not even considering the idea that they might be able to bring them up themselves, even with their own families. And in one particular clinic we worked with, one particular birth home, or Adilny Dom, as it's called in Russia, there were about 12 children abandoned each year to join the state orphanage system, which is basically a loss of much potential in a future life. So our project solved the problem by creating a partnership. And the partnership was quite difficult because it involved state institutions like the local health department, the local employment department. It involved the young mothers. It involved their families, most of whom were also not really prepared to bring up a new child. And it also involved the local community network of families who would help. And what happened, of course, is that the girls received counselling on why it would be possible to keep the child, to the state service, what state services could be used to provide support to the young mother, the training for the families, and also the support network amongst other families in the area who might otherwise have had an entirely negative reaction to single mothers, particularly single mothers of 15 or 16. Now, this partnership network was very informal, but it cut the number of children left to go into adoption by 50% over the space of 4 years. So I think that was an achievement of a partnership. So I would like to hear from each of my three colleagues on the panel today if they can give similar examples and why they worked. What was the problem which gave rise to the need for the partnership and how they were structured and organized? Could I start with Lily? Is that possible, Lily?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephen. And really interesting to hear your example. My example is actually with Restless Development. So it's the current partnership that we have in place on the program that I work on. So the program is called the Development Alternative, and it's a consortium of 7 partners or NGOs. And we work together to revolutionize and change the way that international development is done across the world. Mm-hmm. The primary focus for us is to change the power dynamics within international development to be driven by local community members. And the reason why this partnership works is across 7 different partners, we all have different expertise and a different approach. So we have one partner that's a humanitarian organization. We have another that specializes in creating technology used in developing countries. We have another that specializes in gathering data and creating research. So together, everybody's got a really different outlook on development and really different understanding of how to approach this. And when you're tackling a big question like how to change the sector, you need very different voices in that space. And so at the moment, we've been working for 18 months with great success in this very diverse and different partnership. The program is still ongoing, so I'll have to let you know at the end how we continue. But at the moment, it's a really successful way to tackle such a big and complex challenge. So that's my thoughts.
Could I ask you a question immediately?
Absolutely.
I'm supposed to pass on to the next speaker. But in a way, yours is a partnership on the supply side, which is
exactly
whereas mine is a partnership on the demand side, so to speak. So I just wanted to make the comment, if I understand it correctly, that there's a need for partnership on both sides of the equation. Yeah.
Exactly.
I hate using terms from economics, which is rightfully called the dismal science, but supply and demand is a good way of looking at how the partnerships could be linked together. So you may actually end up with another partnership at the other end of your project.
Exactly, and indeed we do. So exactly the point. Some of the partners are then delivering partners. So exactly, some partnerships are used in sort of the creation of the program and how it goes, how it comes to life. And some of the partnerships are then how do we deliver this program. So yeah, you're exactly right. And I think for me, I think they're both intrinsic on the supply side and the demand side, if that's the words we can use.
I mean, I just use those for convenience as much as anything else.
Yeah.
Chris?
I'm not sure about supply and demand in terms of. I think it's very useful to get specific and give stories of how we see success in order to try and pull out some of the aspects of those projects that we personally see as success to help other people. So the example I give was a project that was set up in Eastern Europe, funded by an international donor, when we were asked to look at issues around Roma people and integration of Roma people. Because in those countries in Europe where we were working, there are a lot of Roma people there and tend to have major problems in terms of assimilation into mainstream education, into the education market, into the housing market, etc., etc., etc. And as an example of what we did, we tried to, right from the very start, make sure that an agenda for any action was not set by international consultants from other countries like me, not from donor agencies that were paying for us, but went to as many people as we could get together from the Roma community to say, right, what are the issues? How can we help? Who are the stakeholders? And from that, we got some really good ideas, some really good advice, and managed to bring into that partnership people who the Roma, leaders of the Roma community, felt were important. So we had representatives of the Roma community, NGOs from the Roma community, people from the school, people from police forces, people from state government and from federal government. And what we managed to do, what we managed to bring to this evolving, developing project was money and resources. But rather than us saying how money and resources should be used, the task given to the group of this partnership group led by Roma people was, if we can find a certain amount of money, how will you use that to ease the problems of non-school attendance, of non-involvement in the labour market? And what happened as a result of that was lots of ideas came up. Some of them might have been a bit daft, some of them were very, very good, and they were owned and pursued by that group of Roma people and stakeholders who'd been brought in. But the whole process, and the aspect that I'm probably most proud of about it, is that it wasn't owned by the state government, by the local government, or by donor agencies or consultants. It was owned by people from the Roma community. So they were defining the problems, defining the solution, defining how we gauge the success of that project. How many people do they expect to get into school as a result of the project? How many people into education? Yeah. And they were very, very pleased from that.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris.
If that helps.
Yes, it does indeed. I'd like to say thank you to Zachary for joining us from DAI this morning. He has a rather tight time slot, I understand, and I will just explain to him that we are discussing concrete examples of partnerships that we have seen in projects that we are working on or worked on in the past that worked, so that later on we can discuss what makes a good partnership, why some partnerships don't work, etc. But first of all, I'd like to go to Sanjay for his example from India. Sanjay, you need to put your microphone on. Sorry, your microphone's on mute.
That's right. Sorry. Steve, the example that I'd like to quote today is actually from the region, Indian subcontinent, from Nepal. And this is a project that we're currently working on. It's a project which is funded by the World Bank. And it's very interesting. We were doing something slightly different over there as part of a larger project called Program for Buddhist Circuit. There was a Buddhist Circuit program which spans several countries, India, Nepal, Bhutan predominantly, and other countries as well. But the corona happened last year, and midway through that program, we realized that some of the stuff that we were going to be doing may not be as relevant any longer, because we were working, we were largely planning to do, we were helping them do urban plan, a regional plan for the area. There's an area called Lumbini, which is the birthplace of Gautam Buddha, or Lord Buddha. And we were originally going to do a plan for the entire regional area, and then Corona happened. And I think it was very fortuitous that there was an alignment of thinking in terms of the eventual client, which is the government client over there in Nepal, the World Bank and us. And we said, look, instead of producing yet another plan, because there are plans, why don't we do some direct support for the women over there? Because the pandemic has hit all developing countries badly, some more than others. And this is one of the most underdeveloped parts of the country, even by Nepali standards. Women participation rate is woefully low because of continued lockdown spread over several months. There was a rise of domestic violence. Nepal largely relies on tourism, a sector which is virtually decimated last year. So on many different angles, people were hurting, and I think there was a call for direct action. So what we are doing now is that we are supporting a group of women enterprises. We have identified small micro enterprises, women who are doing micro businesses. Somebody who's producing honey, somebody, they're making crafts and handicrafts products using bamboo grass or elephant grass or thatch products. So these were women who were running small micro enterprises. Some of them were trying to tap into the tourism market, but were not able to do for a variety of reasons, not very dissimilar, which many MSMEs face across the region. So what we are doing is, because of the short time and the funding envelope availability, we have put together a partnership. It's very interesting. The project is relatively small in terms of number of beneficiaries, but we've had to tap into all levels of partnership. So we've had to work with all the three levels of the government in Nepal, from the Central Ministry of Tourism to the local development LDT, and to the local government. Then we've had to work with the small business and the big business. The big business are the hoteliers, who very often are consumers of services from the small businesses. So we are working with the big businesses and see how they can increase their uptake and how we can put together a program. So we have done a rapid value chain analysis, just to give you a synthesis of what we are doing. We have done a very rapid analysis of each of the sectors these micro enterprises are working in, and then we put together a business plan, and then we are bringing all these different actors from within the community, from the NGO sector, from the development sector, and from the government, to provide support with them, both technical and financial support. We are not giving any direct money to these beneficiaries, but we are providing a technical support. So a very good example of how this 360-degree partnership can, especially if there is a situation like the pandemic, which creates a sense of urgency, which creates a sense of unity, if I may say, between different actors. So we are trying to tap into that sense of urgency and then building our partnership on that.
That's very interesting what you say in relation to the pandemic, because it sounds very much as though you're suggesting, or your experience is, that the partnership may be more flexible than some of the other formal arrangements in terms of dealing with an unforeseen circumstance.
That's right.
It also suggests to me that perhaps partnerships are beneficial where you have a group which is not adequately socially included, like your women entrepreneurs. It gives them an opportunity to participate in the project. I'd like to ask Zachary now if he would like to comment. Zach?
Thank you, Stephen, and pleasure to be participating here.
Great to see you.
Yes, glad to make it from the very still cold and dark East Coast of the U.S. Yeah, partnerships are it's something that I've grappled with during my career as a development consultant in this space on partnerships, because the word itself is quite attractive, and it's something that we certainly all strive to. But what is it authentically and genuinely a partnership? So as consultants or project implementers, contractors, whatever term you want to use, at the end of the day, there's a contract between us and somebody who is giving us the resources on behalf of somebody else to have a positive impact, a social and economic impact. Most of the work, if not all the work that I do at this point, is being funded by private companies that want to do development work around the world. Very similar to all the programs that have been described here. The difference is it's not a multinational bank, or it's not a bilateral donor agency, but it's a company that's looking for sustainable results and shared value. They're trying to achieve both. So I frame this a little bit in coming back to, what does that really mean at partnership? Because there's a contract under the partnership, and can you have the two that are together, right? You have your milestones. You have if you're running a business, you have to deliver on those. And one of the things that I have found is the trusted relationship you need between you and your client, and that's what the level of trust is, in my view, what changes things from being a client to a partner. And that could go in both ways with a government as well. Whether the government is paying you, as like in Sanjay's example, whether it's the World Bank or it's the government, government is still your client. You're trying to deliver something, or the women entrepreneurs you're trying to work, they're still your clients, so to speak, even if they don't hold the contract with you. And you're really not going to get much. You'll hit milestones if you have to, contractually and these kinds of things. But if you're not building that trust, then you're really not, in my view, achieving true partnership. Because what will happen, as Sanjay rightfully said, is something exogenous will happen in your project. Unfortunately, we hit a pandemic, right? Nobody saw that coming. But if it's not that, it's life happens. Things change, staff changes, political economy, policy decisions, and so forth. All of these things are ever changing. So it's a little bit silly to just have a piece of paper and a contract and it says, hey, Chris, hey, Lily, hey, Sanjay, you must do this by March 2021, and you must do this by June 2021. And of course, in good faith, you're going to want to do this, right? You have to, you're contractually obligated. But the difference between that and achieving true partnership is Sanjay going back to the government and the person who holds the contract and say, listen, we just hit a pandemic. We need to pivot. We need to hit these milestones, right? But they may not be exactly the exact ways we thought about in the scope of work or what was envisioned. It could be better. It could be more impactful. It could be more responsive. And the other person on the other side of the table, or at this point, the virtual table or the line, says, I'm so glad, Sanjay, thank you. Thank you for bringing this up. We were thinking the same thing. Let's think this through. What do we need to do? I know that this is not about you trying to shift a goalpost on a contract. I know this is about the beneficiaries. I know that this is about us responding. And to me, that's when you start really getting traction. That is the partnership that you try to achieve with, whether it's the public agency who is benefiting, or the smallholder farmer, or the small SME, the female entrepreneur you're trying to assist, or a very large bilateral donor agency to whom you are contractually obligated. And I always grapple, I say these things because whether it's, we have to distinguish and discern between clients, beneficiaries, contracts, and partnerships. And partnerships are what we should be striving for. But they do require that level of trust, and we have to build it there. And it's tough. It's tough to get there. It's not something that just on day one happens.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Zach. This leads me to my next question. We have a very good question from Ron Finch, but if Ron doesn't mind, I'd like to discuss that after the next one, which is, what are the main barriers to creating a successful partnership? Because some of them, particularly at the end of the beneficiaries and wider stakeholders, work well and some don't. So what does each of the panelists think are the main barriers? I leave aside the issue of, well, you can't really leave aside the issue of trust, but I include the issue of trust immediately. But What do you think are the institutional and other barriers to creating a successful partnership, Chris?
If we go back to try and keep it specific to the Roma project that I was talking about, for us to try and establish leadership of that project by Roma people was itself really quite difficult, because this is a vast generalization, but from my experience in that project, a lot of the, if you like, the elders, the leaders of that community hadn't had formal education. They weren't particularly au fait with how to run meetings, how to set up meetings, how to set up strategies, etc., etc., etc. So we were bringing a kind of alien concept in a way. What that meant that we had to do to try to overcome that lack of experience, I was going to say skill, I don't mean skill, but actual grassroots experience in doing that work, was a whole phase of advocacy and assistance in trying to help people make use of some of these mechanisms of meeting and networking and stakeholder analysis and setting strategies and setting definable goals for projects. So we had to overcome that by positive discrimination, positive help in that area. So that's one area, I think, where there are barriers that have to be specifically addressed. Okay. I'll keep that
Lily?
Quite quick though.
Okay, Lily.
I think for me, the biggest barrier is not having a shared vision of what you're trying to achieve. And I think what goes alongside that is having fundamentally quite different values of kind of what progress looks like, what success looks like. And this is especially true for if you're trying something that's very different, if you're trying to lead a program that is potentially going to take some convincing of many people and maybe even take many years to kind of bring people onto your side. So for me, the biggest ones, vision, values, and then the third I would say is what knowledge you already come with. People are really set in their ways of what works and what doesn't, and so what knowledge you bring to the table and how easily you're able to set that aside and listen to other partners in that space and potentially better ways of working and doing things. So they're my top three.
Okay, Zachary?
I'd support everything that my colleagues already said. What I would briefly suggest also is something a little bit more granular and process related, which is institutional processes. I don't think we can overlook those as well. Sometimes we become beholden to procurement process or changes that we need to make, which can really be out of sync with the time that we need to respond to a particular demand on a project or a particular pivot or shift or request. And there are good reasons why those processes, those checks have been built in place. I do have to say, though, candidly, sometimes it feels like we become a little bit too focused on process and not on the objective and the outcome.
Right, thank you very much. Sanjay?
I think I support Zach what he said, and Lily and Chris as well. There are a couple of other things that I'd like to bring to the table. One, of course, is very often when you talk about partnerships, and especially you talk about partnerships within the development sector, I think very often donors and development agencies, they have very competing priorities. And not only do they have different priorities, these priorities change over a period of time. So that poses problems. So they somehow, when you try and bring these development agencies together for a particular project, it's like trying to get two elephants to move in the same direction, and it's not always easy. They are probably as big bureaucracies as the governments they kind of profess to reform, if not bigger. The other thing is, of course, there is the unsaid thing is that who holds the intellectual leadership on a particular project. So there are many partners, but invariably there is one or two dominant partners who hold the intellectual leadership of that entire initiative. And if that partner is not committed to investing into communication, ownership, team building right early on, then very soon what it becomes is that one person is dictating and the rest are just following, which is not really a partnership, at least not a sustainable partnership. So, that's one of the challenges that, I'm sure we've all faced in different things. Third point that I've mentioned, which Zach originally mentioned as well, is that sometimes the paper partnership itself is the biggest roadblock, because somebody wrote something 3 years ago that in an MOU, and that somebody takes a very literal minded bean counter approach, saying this is exactly what's written and this is my role and this is not my role. So that is another reason why I think it's a big obstacle for partnerships. And then last, I think people change. The concept in a large project, which were a 5-year project, people change, key officials change. Every new guy wants to put in his stamp of doing things differently in his own way, and thereby undermining the collective work that the partnership did together. So that itself poses some problems as well. So
Thank you very much, Sanjay. Thank you very much. Well, in fact, you've touched on some of the issues that are in Ron Finch's question, which I think we actually have to try and answer. Yes. And he asked, to collectively achieve the SDGs, what are some strategies to help promote cooperation by way of knowledge and technology transfer, where competition and capitalist objectives counter the spirit of freely sharing? Now, you've already mentioned the fact that donors compete in a way. The agendas sometimes conflict. I don't know, it depends on which country, which sector, the extent to which the competitive spirit prevails over the cooperative one. But let's look at Ron's question and see what are the strategies for overcoming the barriers to knowledge and technology transfer as a way of facilitating partnership or cooperative process. I don't know whether Zachary wants to take the first shot at this, because he's also mentioned some of these issues.
Sure, you can throw me in the snake pit for the hard one first. Thank you. No, it's a fantastic question. You know what I was.
Well, I mean, when you've killed off the first snakes, we'll be happy to finish off any that you've left.
You got it. You got it. I'll do my best. You know, it's a fantastic question, and it opens up a really interesting discussion. One thing I'll start with saying that I think things are changing for the better. And what I mean there is that the ideas of and the philosophies of competition and quote capitalistic objectives, or if I don't want to put words in Ron's mouth here of what he wrote, but the idea of commercially driven, bottom line driven type thing around competition, I think they're increasingly being realigned to where it's not so traditional me versus you. But we're even amongst private sector companies that are competitors in a particular space, more open source data and knowledge, more open source technology, the gig economy, people bringing their own skills is really disrupting things in a way that, sure, if you look at the pharma industry, for example, what goes into R&D and be able to patent and protect, that's so important. And I'm not suggesting that's going away, and companies will continue to advocate to protect that. But what I am saying is that I think it's becoming a little bit more democratic around the world, because people have more access technologically to bring these types of things, and that's a good thing. I think it's a very, very good thing. So, coming back to the question, I think that there is more alignment. I think that we're seeing much more alignment that sustainability, cooperation are competitive advantages now. And they are no longer the nice to haves. They're no longer the ones that, this is my core business. And if I do this over here, it will make me look good. And maybe, the quote social license to operate, for example. I work quite a bit with energy companies, extractive industries that work on this. And the model is changing for the better, which is saying, I need to be a good corporate citizen. I need to partner truly with government, local communities, for me to be a going concern as a business. Because if I don't do it, then Chris's business is doing it. And the value proposition to people is much more than the next barrel of oil or the next ton of coal or whatever commodity you may be thinking of producing, exporting, and shipping and so forth. But it is also your footprint in that community, in that country, in that province, and so forth. So I like it. I like to see the trend, and we are working quite a bit in this space to where the idea of competition is, I'm going to compete against Sanjay's company to be more sustainable, because ultimately my shareholders, or the people who are buying my goods at my end markets, whether it's an avocado or a pound of coffee or it's an automobile, they want that in the company. They want to buy from a good company. So I think that's really changing quite a bit of the formula of how we think about competition there. Let me turn it back over to you. Hopefully I got a couple snakes there.
No, you've got a couple of very big snakes, possibly even an anaconda, because I think that what you're talking about is that, in fact, the corporation is actually creating a competitive advantage in relation to other firms in the field. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What do you think, Sanjay?
I think it's very interesting. While we are very quick to recognize that there is competition within the private sector, sometimes what is not stated very explicitly is that there is a great deal of competition within the government sector as well.
Yeah. If not more.
Yeah, a lot more. And this reminds me of a project I worked on, more than a decade ago in Cambodia, where we were trying to put together a huge database. We wanted basically to collect all the information on environmental aspect around the Tonle Sap Lake. So we said that, look, let's do a most commonsensical thing. Let us ask all the ministries, all the government departments, what's the data that they have, and let's try to put all of this into one place. We began with a simple map and saying, okay, we have the map of Cambodia. Can we build a GIS system? Ron talked about technology. Can we build different thematic layers on the top of this? The agricultural layer, the environmental layer, the forestry layer, and so on and so forth. And everywhere I went, I would go and meet the top of these ministries. They would be very nice to me, offer me a very nice cup of tea, not cappuccino, which I like, but very, very, very cordial. Extremely polite, and say, excellent idea, Sanjay. And I would come back thinking, yes, we got this ministry. Now I'm going to see some traction. And nothing would, I'd send my guy. They'll say, fine, send, talk to such and such person in my department. The idea was that we put all this on a web portal. We were trying to create a knowledge repository, a web portal where we'll have all the data. Of course, that all the data will not be available to everyone, but we said, okay, we'll give you the rights to decide which you want in the public domain, which you want accessible only to other government departments, which you want to sell. So public, private, and priced. That's how we classified the information. But I won't bore you with the story of months and months of talking and having endless cups of teas and very nice chatter, but nothing really moving on the ground. I had to go all the way to the Prime Minister's office and finally managed to get his speechwriter to slide a paragraph about our project into one of his speeches, and that seemed to do the trick, because the Prime Minister, it was all over the news the next day. Prime Minister thinks sharing data, sharing information is a good idea, and we must always do this. Otherwise, we are doing big disservice to the government. So we took cuttings of that paper, Prime Minister report, and went around, and I think 1 month we signed up 17 ministries. Put together one of the largest database on environment in the next 3 months. So
well done. Lily, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think the question is a really interesting one. And I think I might controversially go against the assumption that capitalist objectives always counter the spirit of freely sharing. I think, I know, I didn't expect me to take this tact either. I think there are, the vast majority of cases would be that, but I think there are some instances where freely sharing can also support capitalist objectives. And that's where we utilize those particular moments. So for example, the Office for National Statistics here in the UK produces ton of data on how the UK is doing with regard to all the SDG goals. And they've made that platform for how they report completely open source, so that any other country can take it and completely replicate the entire method. And the reason behind that is, of course, it's totally in the interest to have other countries' data freely available. It's in the interest for the UK to recognise, the context that we're performing in, and for our aid department to recognise where our priorities are. And it's in the interest of a lot of the UK citizens who need that data, researchers, economists, and so on. And so I think it's those small windows where it's sort of a no-brainer. It's beneficial both in a capitalist sense for business and so on, but it also helps to collectively achieve SDGs. I think that's where we find that perfect balance. So for me, it would be utilizing open source platforms, utilizing digital spaces where things are freely shared, but showcasing that there are real opportunities for business in those sharing. And so it doesn't necessarily contradict. They're not two opposing fields always. I will caveat by saying not always. And so that's what I see as being the way forward.
No, I don't think we're positing the idea that everything that connected with capitalist processes is exclusive and restricts information. I mean, a good example of a sector which supports the economy and which always has to be open is education. Yes, where clearly open access to education is not only a social benefit but also has a clear economic benefit to the economy.
Absolutely.
I'd like to add one comment of my own when it comes to cooperation. In the many years that I've been working in international development projects, one of the key issues has been the lack of coordination or demarcation between the agencies financing the services that we provide in the development of transition and developing countries. And I've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years that this lack of cooperation is to a certain extent being blunted by the fact that the partner countries which we are working with are becoming much stronger in developing their strategies into which they expect our agenda to fit, rather than them having to shoehorn their agendas into some preconceived agenda developed by the financing agency. I monitor projects in Asia Pacific, and I've seen this in many of the small island states in the Pacific, that they now have the technical capacity and the skills and indeed the experience to develop their own policy. They don't need us for the policy anymore. They want us to provide support to the policy which is indigenous. And in a way, because we're all having to work to their agenda, the donors are becoming a little bit more sensitive to the need to cooperate with each other, because in the past, 20 years ago, it was much more competitive. Now, I don't know whether that's the panel's opinion. I'd like to hear it. Was that all agreement, or are you all just thinking?
Thoughts on the end of imperialism. Just I don't want to move too far from Ron's question.
Right.
But just wanted to share what I've been thinking about today, knowing that this panel was coming up, and thinking about partnership, and thinking about what kind of social problems don't need partnership in order to solve them better. What bigger social problem have we got today facing the world than the pandemic? And with that in mind, I was looking at a report today currently produced by the UN Department of Economics and Social Affairs, which is looking at determinants and lessons of responses to the COVID strategy. And what that finds is, predictably, it's not about rich and poor, it's not about socialist or capitalist, it's about other systems that are established in countries, about not necessarily the resources behind social protection services and health services, but the way that they're organized and governance of those services. And to actually quote from the report, what they're saying is that the need for government in addressing the COVID issue to establish effective communications with the public, enjoy its trust, and enlist its active cooperation, ensure cooperation of the experts, etc., all depend on the overall strength and quality of a government's governance system. It's not using the word partnership, but to me, that feels like what we're talking about. It talks about partnership. So to overcome this problem, we've actually got to establish and improve partnerships. Some of the countries that we're talking about, both China and Vietnam, some of the examples used, we're talking about village and community groups that were given the mandate to respond appropriately locally to the COVID issue. So I don't know what anybody else thinks about whether this is an example of partnership or the need for partnership. I've lost your...
Yes, I accept the example you give, but then the question arises as to whether an emergency, which we all hope is temporary, yes, becomes a model, creates partnership mechanisms which become a model that can be then used after the pandemic is over for solving other problems. What's your view on that, Sanjay?
I have mixed feelings about this. I don't necessarily know the answer, because I've seen this repeat time and time again, that there is an exigency, there is a calamity, or there is some compelling reason why people are willing to come together for a common cause, and they forget their functional ambitions, I mean departmental ambitions, and so on and so forth. They can suspend their so-called agendas, and then they can say, fine, let's work together, like perhaps what's happening currently at the moment. I'm not so sure how long lasting this bonhomie would be, how long lasting this, because sooner or later it'll be back to business. And while it's good to make hay while the sun shines, I think, and that's what we are doing, and that's the work that I was telling you about, that we bank upon these opportunistic innovative opportunities that we have. But I am not so sure whether the models which will come out will necessarily. I think what Zach and Chris was also indirectly earlier saying, the need for flexibility more than anything else. What is currently coming out is that institutions, people, they all need to be flexible. They need to be responsive to the evolving needs of the beneficiaries, of the clients. And needs always evolve, and needs always change, and political realities always change. So I think if that flexibility somehow projects and things we can retain, that is one learning. If we can somehow find ways to retain this, I think that would be a big learning. That would be a big success.
Okay, Lily, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I really agree with Sanjay here. I think it's how we retain this learning, but I also think it's the perspective that we come with. Often we're starting to say the new normal, and so on. And I think that speaks to the fact that nobody really wants to return to the old ways in many ways, because it was less effective in many instances. And so I think firstly we have to achieve the sort of common page that we want to use this as an opportunity to progress the sector and to progress how we work and to learn from these changes that we've had. And I think once we're all on that sort of same page, it's much easier to move forward and not to return back. In terms of how we actually retain those changes, I think the biggest thing that I'm wary of is eventually we won't talk about COVID-19 and the pandemic in every conversation we have. I know it seems mad at the moment. I mean, at least I hope, yeah. But how do we make sure that the learnings do still stay pivotal and it's not a moment that's kind of forgotten as it's forgotten out of our news? So for me, I think that means really solidifying the learnings into our programs, into program strategies, into proposals, into the vision we have as an organization. It's embedding them into the sort of, I suppose, the organizations and the programs we work in already, so that those messages are sort of entrenched even once the pandemic is no longer a talking point all of the time.
Okay. I suggest we take a minute out from discussing partnerships to answer a question that Rabinder has now asked, because he's reminding us, I suppose, indirectly of the fact that this conference is all called Consulting Without Borders and not just about partnership and development. And he asked, how do you see the development consulting business work changing in a post-COVID world? Sorry, that word came in again, didn't it? Especially when minimal travel, field visits and so on. How do you see the business changing?
No, I think
Go ahead, Sanjay. Go ahead, Sanjay. You first.
I think this is certainly, for instance, I've been traveling about 50 to 60% of my time for the last 25 years. I travel, almost 20 days a month. I've been doing that for 25 years now. So, but this pandemic, me and I'm sure that you and Chris and all others would also, it has forced us to question: do we really need to go out, jump into a plane every single time? Of course, there is only as much that you can do through a Zoom call. One, and the other thing is we have also realized in the last 1 year that not everything can be done virtually. There are things. There is no substitute to a face-to-face meeting. No matter how well this conference is organized, this can never be as good as the one that you'd had in Bali, right? Because there is only so much that you can do in this. So of course, I think the travel will return, the discussions will return, but I think perhaps what we will see is that many things that we took for granted, that we had to necessarily get on a plane and go somewhere and then do this, we will probably do more and more of things virtually, and it'll not be a given. We'll have to question, we'll have to justify why we need to be there. So I think that's what I see changing.
Zachary, speaking both for yourself and DAI, what do you think about this particular issue?
There's no question, building on what Sanjay said, this has disrupted all sectors. All sectors have been disrupted here, and I don't want to in any way seem being tone deaf of the negative consequences of what the pandemic has done around the world and to lives and to people. Yeah. There's also been, I think we'll see a lot of positive disruptions that have come from it once we can let the dust settle and we can heal a little bit around that. One thing, 2 points that I would mention here. First, building on Sanjay, more rudimentary, there will be a cost alignment in that in the consulting world, there will be an expectation that more money is spent on labor and productive use and less on airplanes and hotels and things that we would otherwise do. That's one thing I would say to Sanjay's point. The second one would be, I am not yet convinced that because at the end of the day, consulting is a people's business. Mm-hmm. The greatest asset we have, competition, is us, right? We can have the greatest tools and the greatest technology, and then somebody else, some 12-year-old in a basement, is going to make a model that is 20 times better than anyone I could do because they're smart and they know how to use a computer better than me. And so as a result, I think what it's still people, and it's that human interaction, and people want it too. Let's not, so what I would say there is, I think we're going to see an acceleration of outcomes, an acceleration of project delivery, and so forth, because what we would have otherwise said, all right, Sanjay, I'll fly out there for the kickoff meeting and we'll get it going. We're going to do the kickoff meeting virtually, but we're still going to go out there. And the difference is our first in-person meeting will be focused on implementation, and we'll have one more meeting focused on implementation as opposed to a meeting focused on preparation or work planning or things like that. So I don't know that there's going to be this total shift of, in a project where I would otherwise fly 5 times, like Sanjay, I spent a lot of time on the plane. Instead of flying 5 times, I'll only go out there once. I'm not yet convinced that'll be the case, but it may be that I go out there 4 times, but the 4 times I go out there, we're really working on project delivery and not planning or budget or preparation or these types of things.
Yeah. Chris?
I've not got a lot to add apart from agreeing that our collective carbon footprint is ridiculous. We're responsible for global warming. The 5 of us, I think. But I think a truism about the pandemic is nothing is going to go back very rapidly to how it was, nor should it. I think it causes us to rethink what we're doing. If we're talking about previously about cultural imperialism by donor agencies and the need to avoid that, one aspect of cultural imperialism is bringing in external foreign consultants, so that maybe the balance needs to change and will change now between local consultants and international consultants. And that may well be a good development in terms of project outcomes.
Okay, I would make a comment on your international versus local, and I've just happened to observed over the last 6 months that the assignments being offered by one of the international financial institutions, which were, I mean, they call for individual experts on a weekly basis, and the balance was roughly 50-50 before COVID, and now it's 90-10, i.e. 10% international, 90% local, and that is a delayed reaction. It's not a reaction to COVID. It's a delayed reaction to the realization that if you have a project that's interesting, let's say Timor-Leste or Pakistan, there are really good consultants already located there, many of whom have been educated in Europe, the US, or India. So you do not necessarily have to go for somebody from Europe or somebody from one of the northern hemisphere countries. Yeah, but however, I do have my reservations about Ravinder's question, and this is based on the fact that I monitor projects, and I'm trying to do that online now. But you can understand, I get the same feeling that I see an advert on the UK TV, which allows you to buy a car online. Now, would I ever buy a car online without actually going and seeing the car, opening the hood, and kicking the tires? The answer is no. Maybe I will do the report work and the planning stuff, as Zach quite rightly suggests, online, but you actually have to kick the tires. I mean, I'm looking at a project, for example, introducing sanitation systems. If I don't see the pipes, if I don't see the sewage plants, I have no idea whether the project is actually producing the results. So I will still have to go back to the field.
You've become an expert in sewage pipes, Steve. I didn't realize this.
Yes, I have actually sewage and water, because I have a lot of projects to monitor, which are, because I'm the finance guy. Unfortunately, everything comes down to money in the end. But I go and have a look at the project, because you can see whether they're on track. Yeah, and you have to see it on the spot.
So I don't know about other countries, but Australia, internet purchasing has gone way up, and going to the shops, going to small retailers or big retailers locally has gone way down. So
yeah, no, I mean, more will be done online, but I think we still have to go out and actually, as Zach rightly remarks, deal with the implementation out in the field, because like Sanjay, I've spent more than 30 years. I mean, this is the first time I've actually lived in the UK since 1987, and that's only due to COVID. Can I ask?
I was just going to just a quick point on that, which is bringing it a little bit circle to one of the first questions, and the title of this panel is partnerships and cooperation. Again, let us not let the pandemic disrupt the human connections that we need to have that drive partnerships, and that's being in the room. That's not talking about the client or the contract. That's having the coffee, or in Sanjay's case, the cappuccino. So Sanjay, when you come here, I will have one prepared for you. It's us being people and connecting with those people in person, and we should never leave. And that drives partnership and cooperation and trust.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think very well said, Zach. I think because at the end of the day, the partnerships are built on relationships, and relationships, I'm sorry to say, can only be built so far on virtual platforms. Your real relationships, as we all know, are it's only, there's no substitute for face to face.
No.
Yeah. No. And my other comment would be that in many cases, the work that is being done online, I'm talking about my own work, takes longer to do online, because you are waiting always for responses to emails, and so therefore a mission that I could probably do usually in 2 weeks, sometimes take 4, because it's going to be an exchange of electronic contacts, and time is not only money, it's more valuable than money, because you can't make it, you can only save it. Yes. All right. I'd like to ask a question. Yeah, I'd like to ask a question is, what do you think are the key problems in actually managing the resources within a partnership? Now, we think very often in terms of the fact that we have resources from a financing source, and we are going to use this to deliver services to beneficiaries and stakeholders, some of whom may be involved in the actually delivery process, some of whom may be tangential to it. So how do you manage the resources in a partnership? I'm sorry, this is a problem that's been bugging me for years. Who wants? I see no volunteers to speak for this, so I'm going to go back to Zach again because he always gets the snake pit first.
Yeah, so thanks. You know, on that.
Well,
you know,
I have great trust in you, my son.
Yeah, this is one of those instances with being virtual may be working in your favor, Stephen. Managing resources. You know, I'm going to. I think I'll let some of the other panelists, if they want to speak about how you manage budget and people and time. I think what I want to speak to a little bit, which is a little bit more difficult, and certainly not something I have gotten right, but something I've worked on, is coming back to your point, the resource of time. Because in all of the projects that we do, and I don't know everybody's portfolios here exactly, but there is that opportunity in time to make the difference that we need to make, because the world is ever changing. You know, politicians change, the policy environment changes, some exogenous effects happens. So to me, and something I've tried to do better and better and better in managing teams, which, you know, people's times and so forth, is infusing the political economy and the urgency of now, and now being those 6 months or those 12 months, that window of opportunity, that space to maneuver, to make the difference you want. Because as we all said, you know, that MOU that was signed 6 months ago, that might as well be the Articles of Incorporation of something from 1776. At the pace that we work in today, it changes so much. So I suppose, Stephen, I'm hitting you back a little bit hard by not slaying the snake here, but saying, you know, how you manage the resource of time, and time not related to your milestones, but time into how you can make the difference. And the one solution or one method that I've been trying to do with my teams and my partners is to absorb and internalize the political economy of now, to allow that to shape the delivery of the program and the pace, and then let budget follow, if that makes any sense.
Well, time is the key resource in what we're doing. Okay, money is important, but time is the key resource. And one of the things that concerns me most at the moment is with the development programs is that too much time is being lost due to COVID, when in fact it is time that I have more time to do things now because things are shut down than I had before. So I have a bigger opportunity to do something rather than a less. But most people conceive the pandemic as being something which creates less opportunity. Okay, can I hear Lily's view on this?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And it's something that we're really grappling with in the current program that I work on. So one thing that we have implemented that we've not done before is a very flexible approach to resourcing. And when I talk about resourcing, I do mean time, and I do mean in many ways physical resources, but I mainly mean the budget that we have here. And it's very difficult to create a flexible budget when you have donor constraints, who are not famously keen on a very flexible budget, moving things around all the time. But that's one thing that we really built into this program, that fundamentally we're going to put innovation and flexibility first. So the way that we run our monitoring and evaluation is continual. And what that means is we recognize what needs to be changed, not halfway through the program or at the end, but on a near weekly basis. And that reflects our resourcing. Our resourcing then, changes as we recognize what we need to change on the program. So the constraints have been to really agree this with our donor, to ensure that a flexible approach is kind of okay, but it's also really to instill this new perspective that resourcing in this way is positive. Normally, we recognise an underspend or an overspend as a negative, and it is to some extent definitely a big underspend or overspend is never a great thing. But small changes suggest that what we've done is we've rapidly responded to what we've seen in the context there and then, and that's a good thing. So I think for me, the biggest and most exciting development from resourcing is changing our approach to it to something that should be flexible, and that changing it up a lot is not a bad thing within reason.
Okay, Sanjay.
I'm going to circle back to something which Chris said earlier in terms of the substitution of international consultants with nationals, and it has been a long time in coming, and it's largely been driven by cost considerations in the past. That why do we need to pay X flying somebody from North America or Europe when we can do it for Y for somebody locally. I'm going to play the devil's advocate. I'm going to argue the other way around. Having worked on both sides, initially as a national consultant and then now working as an international consultant. Other things being equal, I think somebody from outside your own country brings a couple of things which a national consultant often struggles with. One is perhaps what, if you may call it, a non-partisan attitude. I think I don't need to plug into the local politics or the local economy or to the local blah, blah, blah. I can go and then do a purely technical work and get out of the country without having to bother, whose kind of feathers I'll kind of ruffle. So that's one. In terms of resourcing for partnerships, and I this is in context of what you're talking about, because I've been talking to many of these multilateral banks, ADB, World Bank, and so on, and they're all thinking on these lines. If you see all the new projects being identified, almost all of them are either requiring you to work from home or predominantly they are national consultants oriented. Yeah. So that one is this non-partisan thing. The other thing is to be able to say stupid things with a laugh, which a national consultant would hesitate in saying. When I say stupid, I mean the tough things, which a national consultant very often finds much more difficult to say than an outsider, and any outsider. It's not a reflection on the competence of the person, but just that as an outsider, you can take that much more latitude. So the third and last point is that paradoxically, many things I'm discovering, and Stephen, you would probably, I do not know whether you'll agree with me, they are taking much longer. Earlier, what I could achieve in a one-day meeting, I could fly to Kathmandu and then complete in one day. Sometimes now takes 9 days, because we're doing it virtually and trying to do it one by one, or getting all the people in the same room at the same time is not always possible. Yeah. So this is not always the case that doing things virtually makes it faster. Sometimes it makes it slower.
No, I would certainly second that. The example is that I'm doing some work with China at the moment, and therefore when I want a meeting, it either means that I'm getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to match their 10 a.m. time slot, or I'm asking them to work very late or overnight, and neither of us like it, so we end up with a short afternoon. Yes. Each day, when there's actually a possibility of being able to talk even online, and then lots and lots of emails. So the missions are taking much longer, and I'd rather go and kick the tires. Now, I'd like to, we are supposedly at the end of our slot, but as the previous panel went over, I intend to grab us another 10 minutes and no more. It's all right, Chris, another 10 minutes.
Can I just come in on the resources issue a bit?
Yeah, sure.
Well, firstly, agreeing with Sanjay, and I think what Sanjay is saying is giving us permission for you and me, Stephen, to put on our resumes that we're good at saying stupid things. I think that's a very really wise suggestion from him. Yeah, very, very second degree in that. In terms of resources, how to manage resources, I think it's the same words that we use for every one of these questions on examining every aspect of partnerships. They're words like sharing, openness, trust, being explicit about what resources stakeholders bring to the partnership agreement, and recognizing that resources, as everybody I think has said, resources are not just financial. They can be a whole range of things. As Zach has mentioned about the resource of time. There is the resource of, I think as Lily mentioned, hands, people to do things. There are resources like data, information that people can bring to a meeting. There are resources like access to citizens, to society, to people, to other groups that people bring to the meeting. So I think, again, one of the the key words, the hurrah words for partnership are listening, being explicit, thinking outside of the box, and recognizing that people bring a whole range, a whole host of different talents, different skills, different resources, including the ability to say silly things at times.
Yep.
As Sanjay tells us.
Yeah. He's preaching to the converted, I think. Yes.
I think he is. Yes, definitely we're converted.
Yeah, definitely we're converted. I'd like to ask each of you, just in a couple of minutes, to comment on what you think are the best ways of measuring whether a partnership is being successful. Yes, because there are plenty of examples where the relationship doesn't work, it doesn't gel, the objectives seem to be lost in the processes, as Zach has pointed out. But how do you see whether a project is really successful?
Bill Gates in his book, Business at the Speed of Thought, gives a very simple litmus test. If any partnership is working or any project is being met or run well, and that test is how fast does the bad news travel? How far, right? Good news always travels fast. Everybody wants to share good news, and invariably, as a result, the big boss is the last one to hear the bad news, because everybody wants to hide it. So I think that if partnerships work well, is that when bad news can travel very quickly.
That's just the opposite of a saying in Scotland, which is that bad news is the only thing that travels faster than the speed of light.
That's true. Yes.
Okay. All right. Comments from the rest of us? That was a very nice one. Thank you for reminding me of Bill Gates's book.
If I can chime in on that, when a third party sings the praises of the work you're doing, when it's not me saying, look at what a good job I did, and if my partner is the ministry, it's not the ministry saying, here's a success story, here's a case study, what we all do to sort of put it, but it's the entrepreneur that we've been helping for the small business who says, what a fantastic project that was. It really helped me. I hope, hey Sanjay, what's going to happen when this is all over? Because I have other people. When you have what I call, for lack of a more graceful term, the third party cheerleaders who have genuinely not been set up to be cheerleaders, but they're just saying it. That means you've delivered value. You and your partner have delivered value to humanity.
Yeah.
And they have authentically validated and said, this is working. To me, that is the most gratifying, hard to achieve, but genuine sign of successful cooperation and partnership.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. You want to add anything else, Lily and Chris?
Zach's just said exactly what I was going to say, but said it better. So,
Lily?
Also very well said. I think the only thing I would add is if you've got a good partnership, you're able to have frank and very open conversation. And so it's a good partnership because you're feeling it work every day. I think if you've got no idea how the other one's doing, that's probably a bad sign sort of from the offset. So I would just say it should be obvious through your daily conversation, really, with one another.
Okay, now if you'll allow me to, I'd like to do a very 2-minute summary of basically the conclusions we've come to. Yes, that partnerships work well when they are based on a trust relationship between all the members of the partners. Otherwise, the cooperation simply doesn't take place. Partnerships work well when there's a common agenda or an understanding of a common agenda that everybody can work towards. Partnerships work well when there's what I would like to call, in Zach's entrepreneur example, customer satisfaction for the people that we're working with. And it works well where there's clarity and transparency in the use of resources and the planning of the process of producing outputs. So those are the very, very general observations I make from your comments today. I would like each of you to spend 1 minute just commenting on anything else that you think that we haven't covered, which is relevant to the discussion before we move on to the next stage of the conference. Chris.
All right, very quickly. We've touched on it, but not too much. Again, in preparation for this, I was thinking about what would be a really taxing social problem that requires a partnership to solve in the best possible way. I was looking at cyberbullying. Who are the potential partners for cyberbullying? And it seems to me that if we go into that kind of problem and again think outside of the box for that, we're talking about victims. We're talking about victims' families, we're talking about schools, we're talking about police, we're talking about counsellors, we're talking about bullies and their parents. We're also maybe talking about social media platforms. Yep. They are stakeholders in this. We'd have to think as widely as we possibly can. So I'll shut up now, but it just that fascinates me because I've been reading quite a lot about the terrible impact of cyberbullying on young people.
Okay, Lily.
I think it's been touched upon, but one thing I'd just love to share more about is the importance of local partnerships and of putting them as a priority over partnering with kind of similarly international partners. I think it adds a depth to your work. It really should be leading what we do. And I think we've touched upon this, but I think in years to come, that will be really the focus of international development, whether we can shift with the times and put the people who should be first, or whether we kind of, we don't. And then I think that will be much worse for the sector. So that's all from me.
Okay, Sanjay?
Stephen, I just pick up from what you said earlier. The only thing that I'd like to say is partnership should be everything that you said it should be, except that we need to still figure out how we allocate responsibility and accountability.
Yeah.
So I think that is the challenge when you work in these partnerships. Who is responsible when the shit hits the fan, and what part of that project is you are accountable for. So I think accountability mechanisms to build within partnerships is very important, and I think that's something we need to be cognizant of.
Okay, thank you very much, Sanjay. And last, Zachary. I'm doing this in alphabetical order this time. Yeah.
A final thought would be don't force it. I think what's more detrimental is a bad partnership that is forced because somebody somewhere thinks that that's what needs to be done, as opposed to one that is formed, because a poor partnership will not only soil a lot for your project, it'll soil a lot for everybody else. It can run through an industry, and all of a sudden people walk away and say that was a bad project or a bad engagement. We tried that, it didn't work. Actually, it could have worked, but when there is a forced partnership, you're trying to force people into a relationship that's not there. It goes back to trust. Don't let it evolve. Let it happen naturally. There will be hits and there will be hits and there will be misses, and that's okay. But I'm a word to everybody, and we've all been in this situation when somebody says, Chris, you will partner with Sanjay, and you will do, you will do this. They may have good reasons for it, but it's dangerous. You're playing with fire, so be careful.
Yeah. Okay. I quite agree. Partnerships are sensitive relationships which need to be delicately managed, I think is basically what Zach is saying there.
Yes.
Well, that brings us to the end of our session. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your comments. You've given me far too many ideas to digest in just one day. But thank you once again for taking the time out to join us at today's conference. All the best to you. Look forward to seeing you again, hopefully in the flesh, sometime in 2022. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this fantastic discussion. Thank you for joining from far away from Australia, for Chris. Thank you, Zach, for making the time. Sanjay joined the 2 panels. He was yesterday in the happiness panel and today in the partnerships panel. and Lily contributing from her experience in the Restless Development Organization. So thank you so much. And just a few words before we wrap up, because we really need to move on to our next activity. But just wanted to say that Margaret, Gabriel's mother, would like for me to convey her greetings again to all of the conference participants. She has been with us for both days. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring her on stage because, again, the technology sort of didn't work in her favor. She's in Germany now, in lockdown as well. But she's been watching, and she sends her heartfelt congratulations to all the speakers for excellent delivery of the event, and to all of us. I also wanted to say that the foundation, now that we are pivoting and trying to change the format in which we operate, we're thinking about making these online broadcasts more regular. And if we have to meet, then let's not meet once a year, but maybe we can meet online more often. And I will be definitely looking into that, and hopefully we can bring back some of the speakers or all of the speakers in more in-depth one-on-one conversations. And we will, of course, let you know. So please stay tuned to our activities. I also wanted to say that we are thinking very seriously about starting a mentorship program. Do you see how many great experts we have, and that we can actually engage, and who are willing to give their time to us? And I just thought, why don't we do something more with that? And I will be approaching them and asking them to possibly contribute a little bit more of their time on the regular basis, so that we could establish a mentorship program where they could be available for those who need their expert help. And that could be younger consultants, that could be someone who is entering a particular area of consultancy and needs help. So this is definitely in our agenda. And with this, I would like to conclude the second day of our international conference, Consulting Without Borders, Working Together for a Better Future. And I want to say that I hope to see you all exactly in 1 year on February 1st for our next conference, Consulting Without Borders. But if you ask me where, I don't have the answer yet. So please stay tuned, and meanwhile, stay healthy. All the very best to you and your families. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye.